6 years of marriage to Adriana, 14 professional wins in the octagon, and one championship eliminator fight standing between me and the title shot I had been working toward my entire career. My life was on track until I found those text messages from Jake the Snake Donovan on my wife's phone. Not just any messages, but intimate ones that turned my stomach. Not just from any opponent, but from the exact man I was scheduled to fight in 3 weeks. Some might call it a cruel twist of fate. I call it an opportunity. Before I tell you how I discovered my wife's betrayal and what happened when I faced her lover in the octagon, let me know where you are watching from and hit subscribe if you have ever turned pain into power. My parents crossed the border from Mexico with nothing but the clothes on their backs and dreams for their unborn son. They worked multiple jobs, saved every penny, and made sure I had opportunities they never did. Education came first in our household, but they also recognized my athletic talent early on. When I showed interest in mixed martial arts at 12, my father took on weekend janitorial work to pay for proper training. Discipline and respect, my father would say. These make a man Carlos, not just how hard he can hit. I took those words to heart, training relentlessly, while maintaining honor roll status throughout high school. I earned a partial scholarship to study kinesiology at State, where I continued developing my skills in the university's fight club. After graduation, I went pro, slowly building my reputation on the regional circuit before signing with one of the major MMA organizations 3 years later. My record of 14 wins and 2 losses spoke for itself. Both losses came early in my career, and I had been on a 7-fight win streak that put me in title contention. I was known for my technical approach, combining wrestling background with devastating striking. Commentators called me methodical and surgical in the octagon, a fighter who relied on skill rather than brute force. I met Adriana at the after-party following my 10th professional win. She stood out immediately, not just for her beauty, but for her confidence. While other women at these events often seemed fascinated by the glamour and violence of fighting, Adriana engaged me in conversation about proper recovery techniques. As a physical therapist specializing in sports medicine, she understood the toll fighting took on the body. "You favor your right shoulder when you throw combinations," she observed that first night. Old injury, I was impressed by her eye for detail. Our conversation lasted hours, and by the end of the night I knew she was special. We dated for 6 months before moving in together, and I proposed 6 months after that. Our wedding was intimate, attended by my family and close friends from the fighting community. Life with Adriana seemed perfect. She understood the demands of my career, the grueling training camps, and the mental focus required before fights. She even integrated herself into my professional life, giving me recovery massages, helping with nutrition, and becoming friendly with my coaches and training partners. Having a physical therapist as a wife was a competitive advantage other fighters envied. The championship eliminator match against Jake the Snake Donovan was announced 3 months ago. A victory would guarantee me a title shot, the culmination of everything I had worked for. Jake was a formidable opponent with a similar record, known for his trash talk and flashy fighting style. Our contrasting approaches made for a compelling matchup that fans had been requesting. I threw myself into preparation training twice daily, 6 days a week. During fight camps, I always became more withdrawn, focusing entirely on the task at hand. Adriana had always been supportive during these periods, but this time felt different. She seemed distant, constantly on her phone, scheduling more girls' nights than usual, and working late at her clinic. The physical affection between us diminished, which I attributed to my exhaustion and her respect for my focus. 3 weeks before the fight, I was scheduled for an afternoon sparring session, but my training partner canceled due to illness. Coach sent me home to rest, saying, "Fresh mind, fresh body. Take the afternoon off." I arrived home around 2 p.m., 2 hours earlier than Adriana expected me. Her car was not in the driveway, which was unusual since her clinic closed at noon on Thursdays. I showered and stretched, trying to make good use of the unexpected free time. Around 3:30, I heard her key in the door. "Carlos, what are you doing home?" Her voice carried a note of panic that immediately set me on edge. "Training got canceled," I replied, studying her flushed face and slightly disheveled hair. "Where were you emergency patient?" she said quickly, setting down her purse. "Let me shower and I will make us some lunch." As she disappeared into the bathroom, her phone began buzzing repeatedly on the kitchen counter. One notification, then another and another. Something felt wrong. In 6 years of marriage, I had never invaded Adriana's privacy, had never felt the need to check her phone. But instinct, the same instinct that had saved me countless times in the octagon, was screaming at me. I picked up her phone. The lock screen showed multiple message previews from Jake D, with phrases like, "Miss you already and cannot wait until next time." My hands trembled as I realized who Jake D must be. I knew Adriana's passcode, had seen her enter it countless times. I punched it in, praying I was misunderstanding. The full message thread confirmed my worst fears. Explicit exchanges, plans for hotel meetings, complaints about having to attend my fights when she would rather be with him. They had been seeing each other for over 3 months since shortly after my fight with Jake was announced. There were hotel receipts in her email, explicit photos they had exchanged, and worst of all, messages from the night of my last fight where she had apparently met him just hours after I stepped out of the octagon. My stomach lurched. I barely made it to the kitchen sink before vomiting. Cold sweat broke out across my skin as the reality sank in. My wife was sleeping with my next opponent. The man I was preparing to fight had been inside my home in my bed with my wife. I heard the shower running, giving me time to think. My initial impulse was to confront her immediately, to rage and demand explanations. But something deeper, colder, and more calculated took hold. Jake the Snake Donovan had taken something from me, had violated not just my marriage, but the sacred space of competition. In 3 weeks I would be locked in a cage with him. No better revenge existed in the world. I replaced her phone exactly as I had found it, wiped my mouth and made a decision. I would say nothing, not yet. I would prepare for this fight like never before, and I would make him pay in the most publicly devastating way possible. That night I told Adriana I needed to sleep in the guest room because of a tweaked back that required more space. She seemed relieved, which only twisted the knife deeper. From that moment I lived a double life in my own home, pretending everything was normal while planning my response to this betrayal. The morning after my discovery, I called a divorce attorney recommended by a fighter who had recently gone through a messy separation. The consultation was brief but informative. California's no-fault divorce laws meant that Adriana's infidelity would not significantly impact the division of our assets, but documenting everything was still important. I began gathering evidence, taking screenshots of their messages when she was showering, noting dates and times of her unexplained absences. Living under the same roof as Adriana, while knowing the truth, was psychological torture. She continued her performance as the supportive fighter's wife, preparing my meals, asking about training, all while her phone constantly buzzed with messages I now knew were from Jake. The intimate moments that had once been natural between us became unbearable. Every touch felt contaminated. When she tried to kiss me goodnight, it took everything in me not to recoil. In the gym, however, I found clarity. I channeled every ounce of betrayal, hurt, and rage into my training. My sparring partners noticed the difference immediately. "Jesus Carlos, take it down a notch." My main training partner, Alex, gasped after I landed a combination that nearly knocked him out despite the protective headgear. "Save something for Donovan." My coach pulled me aside after that session. "Something has changed," he said, studying my face. "You are fighting like a man with something to prove, like a man with nothing to lose." "Just focused on the opportunity," I replied, unwilling to share the truth even with him. "Well, channel it, but control it. Rage makes men sloppy. Cold calculation wins fights." 1 week before the fight, we had the pre-fight press conference. Sitting across from Jake at the dais was surreal. He played his usual cocky character, making predictions about how easily he would dispatch me. What the audience did not see was the smirk he gave me when the cameras briefly turned away, the slightly too familiar way he asked, "How is Adriana still doing that amazing deep tissue work?" The implication was clear. He knew that I did not know, and he was enjoying the secret power it gave him. That confirmed what I had suspected: this was no random affair. He had deliberately pursued my wife, perhaps, as psychological warfare before our fight. It only strengthened my resolve. Adriana grew increasingly nervous as the fight approached not with her usual concern for my safety, but with thinly disguised anxiety. She offered to miss the fight for the first time in our relationship, citing a work obligation. "No," I insisted calmly. "You should be there. I want you to watch this one up close." The night before weigh-ins, I finally let the mask slip. I waited until she was getting ready for bed, her phone charging in the kitchen. I retrieved it, walked into our bedroom, and tossed it on the bed beside her. "You should be more careful with your passcode," I said, my voice unnervingly calm even to my own ears. "Jake seems eager to see you after the fight tomorrow." Her face went through a cascade of emotions: shock, denial, fear, and finally desperate pleading. "Carlos, I can explain. It is not what you think. Really. Because I think my wife has been sleeping with my opponent for months. I think every time you said you were working late or out with friends, you were with him. I think you betrayed not just our marriage, but actively worked to undermine the biggest opportunity of my career." Faced with the direct accusation, she crumbled. Tears flowed as she admitted to the affair, but offered pathetic justifications she had felt neglected during my training camp. Jake had pursued her relentlessly. After meeting at one of my fights, it had started as just texting but evolved into something more. "I never meant to hurt you," she sobbed. "It was a mistake. We can fix this. Go to counseling. I will end it with him immediately. I love you, Carlos." Her words felt hollow, manipulative. This was not a momentary lapse, but a calculated campaign of deception. I remained standing by the door, emotionless. "Watch the fight tomorrow," I said finally. "Then pack your things." I spent that night in a hotel, needing complete separation from her to maintain my focus. Sleep came surprisingly easily. The uncertainty had been worse than the truth. Now I had clarity of purpose: win the fight, end my marriage, rebuild my life. The morning of the fight, my coach commented on my unusual calmness. "No pre-fight jitters today. Nothing but focus," I replied, my mind clear for the first time in weeks. The arena buzzed with energy as I made the walk to the octagon. Fight night always created a unique atmosphere, electric with anticipation. Spotlights swept across the crowd as the announcer bellowed introductions. I scanned the front rows and found Adriana in her usual seat, looking pale and tense. Our eyes met briefly before she glanced away. Jake entered with his typical showmanship, playing to the crowd, smirking and shadowboxing. The referee called us to the center for final instructions, and Jake could not resist one last psychological jab. "Your wife gives great pep talks," he muttered too low for the referee to hear, among other things. I said nothing, maintaining the emotionless mask I had perfected. When the bell rang, we circled each other cautiously. Jake came out aggressive, throwing flashy combinations that looked impressive but lacked efficiency. I stayed defensive through much of the first round, absorbing his attacks on my guard, studying his patterns. "Vasquez seems hesitant tonight," I heard one commentator observe. Not his usual calculating self. They did not understand that I was calculating more carefully than ever before. Every fighter has patterns, telegraphed movements that signal their next attack. Jake's were becoming clear. He dropped his right hand slightly. Before throwing his signature left hook, he shifted his weight noticeably before attempting takedowns. The first round ended with Jake ahead on points, but burning excessive energy. Between rounds, my coach urged more offense, but I reassured him with a nod. "I see everything. Trust me." Round 2 began with Jake growing more confident, thinking his game plan was working. I began implementing counters to his patterns, timing his left hook with a straight right that snapped his head back. Surprise registered on his face. The momentum shifted subtly as I landed more frequently, still measured but increasingly effective. The turning point came midway through the second round. Jake telegraphed another left hook, dropping his right hand as expected. Instead of the straight right he anticipated, I ducked under and delivered a devastating liver shot that folded him momentarily. The crowd roared as I followed with a combination that sent him stumbling back to the cage. "Vasquez has sprung the trap," the commentator shouted. "He was downloading data in that first round, and now he is executing. I could have finished him then." The referee watched closely as I landed blow after blow. But something cold inside me wanted to prolong this to make the lesson complete. I backed off slightly, allowing Jake to recover just enough to continue. The third round became a systematic dismantling. I exploited every weakness I had identified, countering his increasingly desperate attacks with surgical precision. His face transformed under my fists, swelling around the eyes, blood trickling from his nose and a cut above his eyebrow. The cocky expression was long gone, replaced by growing fear. In a clinch against the cage, Jake made his final mistake. Blood spraying with each labored breath, he whispered. "She moaned my name, louder than yours." Something shifted in me then, a final restraint breaking loose. I stepped back, feinted a low kick that made him drop his hands, and launched a perfectly timed high kick that connected with the side of his head. He collapsed immediately unconscious before he hit the canvas. The referee pulled me away, though I made no move to continue striking. The victory was complete, more devastating than anything I had delivered in my career. The official result: knockout 3 minutes and 27 seconds into the third round. In my post-fight interview, I maintained professionalism, crediting my coaches and training partners. I made no mention of the personal betrayal that had fueled my performance. That victory was private, even if it had played out in public. When I returned to the locker room, several messages from Adriana waited on my phone. I ignored them all. Hours later, after medical clearance and press obligations, I returned home to find her sitting on our couch, eyes red and swollen from crying. "Carlos, please," she began immediately. "What you saw today in the octagon was the real Jake. Selfish, weak when challenged. I made a terrible mistake." I walked past her to the closet where I had already packed her suitcases the previous day. I dragged them into the living room and placed a manila envelope on top containing divorce papers my attorney had prepared. "Your name is on the lease for your clinic apartment," I said flatly. "You can stay there until you figure out something permanent. You cannot just throw away 6 years of marriage," she cried, grabbing my arm. "People make mistakes. Marriages survive affairs all the time. We can go to counseling, rebuild trust. I choose you, Carlos. I choose our marriage." I gently but firmly removed her hand. "But I do not choose you. Not anymore. You did not make a mistake, Adriana. You made hundreds of deliberate choices day after day to betray me. And you chose the one man who could hurt me professionally, as well as personally." Her tears turned to anger then. "So this whole fight was just about your ego, your macho revenge. Did you even consider what I needed? How lonely I was during your training camps?" "The Uber will be here in 10 minutes, I replied, refusing to engage with her attempts to shift. Blame. "I have changed the security codes and contacted our property manager. Your key will stop working tomorrow." She tried several more angles, threatening to tell everyone I had kicked her out, promising to change, suggesting I was acting from temporary hurt. Nothing penetrated the calm certainty I had found. When the Uber arrived, I carried her bags to the car myself, closed the door firmly, and watched her drive away from my life. The weeks following the fight brought a wave of professional opportunities alongside personal challenges. My dominant victory had captured the attention of fight fans and promoters alike. As promised, a title shot was scheduled for 6 months later. Sponsorship offers poured in. My social media following tripled. Meanwhile, Adriana launched a persistent campaign to win me back. It began with tearful voicemails and apologetic texts that I never answered. When those went unanswered, she escalated to sending handwritten letters explaining how Jake had pursued her, how she had been vulnerable during my training camp, how deeply she regretted her actions. These went directly into the trash. She enlisted mutual friends to speak on her behalf, most of whom were uncomfortable with the role but felt obligated to try. "She is absolutely devastated, man," my friend Miguel told me during a training session. "Says she made the biggest mistake of her life." "And I made the best decision of mine," I replied, ending the conversation. When direct appeals and proxies failed, Adriana tried showing up at my gym during training sessions, creating scenes that my coach eventually had to address by banning her from the premises. She waited outside after sessions, instead following me to my car with increasingly desperate pleas. Jake Donovan, meanwhile, had his own consequences to face. Our fight had exposed significant weaknesses in his game, and his previous trash talk made his decisive defeat more embarrassing. His next fight was scheduled against a much lower-ranked opponent, a clear demotion. 2 weeks after our bout, I received a message from him on social media. "I know you will never forgive me, and I do not deserve it," he wrote. "But I want you to know I regret what happened with Adriana. It was unprofessional and wrong on every level. Congratulations on your victory. You were the better man in every way." I did not respond. His apology meant nothing to me. It was likely motivated by self-preservation, as rumors of the affair had begun circulating in fighting circles, damaging his already tarnished reputation. The divorce proceedings moved forward efficiently. California's no-fault approach meant that despite her infidelity, Adriana was entitled to her share of our marital assets. I did not contest this, wanting only a clean, quick separation, rather than a prolonged legal battle. My attorney negotiated a settlement that was fair, if not entirely satisfying. The price of freedom was worth it. Throughout this period, I focused on healing. I began seeing a therapist specializing in betrayal trauma, which helped me process the anger and grief that might otherwise have consumed me. I reconnected with family, spending weekends with my parents, who provided the unconditional support I needed. In the gym, I found purpose and direction, training with renewed focus for my upcoming title shot. The final confrontation came 3 months after our separation, 1 month before the divorce would be finalized. I was leading a training session with young fighters at my gym when Adriana burst through the doors, clearly emotional and possibly intoxicated. "Carlos, please," she shouted across the gym, causing everyone to stop and stare. "I cannot do this anymore." My coach moved to intercept her, but I signaled him to wait. I calmly asked the young fighters to take 5 minutes, then approached Adriana, maintaining a safe distance. "You need to leave," I said quietly. "This is my workplace." To my shock, and the visible discomfort of everyone present, she actually fell to her knees. "I will do anything," she sobbed. "Anything to fix this. I love you." I made one terrible mistake. 3 months of deliberate deception is not one mistake, I replied, keeping my voice even. "And this display is not about love. It is about your guilt and your image." I helped her to her feet, walked her outside to prevent further spectacle, and called her a ride. As we waited, I finally said what I had been processing in therapy for months. "I forgive you, Adriana. Not for your sake, but for mine. I cannot carry this anger forever. But forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. Our marriage is over. Please respect that and find a way to move forward with your life." It was the last time we spoke directly. The divorce was finalized a month later. I heard through mutual friends that she eventually left her position at the sports clinic and moved back to her hometown in Oregon. 6 months after discovering the affair, I stepped into the octagon for my title fight. My parents sat ringside wearing T-shirts with my name. The fight went the full 5 rounds, a grueling test of skill and will that ended with the referee raising my hand and the announcer proclaiming me the new champion. In my victory speech, I thanked my parents for teaching me that true strength comes from integrity and perseverance. Life settled into a new rhythm. I defended my title twice over the next year. I dated casually at first, then met Sophie, a kindergarten teacher whose knowledge of MMA was limited but whose interest in me extended beyond my career. She attended fights nervously but enthusiastically, genuinely concerned for my well-being rather than the glamour of the fight game. A 1.5 years after the divorce, I heard that Adriana and Jake had briefly attempted a relationship that imploded within months. According to mutual friends, he had cheated on her with multiple women, a pattern apparently well established before their affair began. There was a certain cosmic justice in this that I acknowledged without joy. Their pain brought me no pleasure. I had moved beyond needing their suffering to heal my wounds. The betrayal changed me, as such experiences inevitably do. I became more cautious with trust, more careful about who I allowed into my inner circle. But I refused to become bitter or closed off. The discipline that made me a champion in the octagon served me equally well in recovery, facing pain, directly working through it, methodically emerging stronger on the other side. Looking back now, I realize that the greatest victory was not the knockout, satisfying as that was. It was not even becoming champion, though, that fulfilled a lifelong dream. The true win was choosing myself when it mattered most, refusing to accept less than I deserved, and rebuilding a life aligned with the values my parents had instilled in me. Have you ever had to stand your ground when someone betrayed your trust? How did you find the strength to choose yourself? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and like this video so others facing similar challenges can find it. Consider sharing with someone who might be struggling with betrayal or difficult decisions. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes our greatest victories happen outside the ring when we honor our worth and refuse to settle for less than we deserve.